So we're going to start discussing the diagnostic sector. With you all, we're going to discuss a few companies and the entire how the entire sector works. So today we are kickstarting this series by discussing an interesting investment thesis that we've been working on for the last few days. A microcap diagnostic company listed on the SME exchange, 800 odd crore market cap. We found it very interesting because we found one or two big catalysts of change that are coming through. And the name of the company is Chandan Healthcare. Very small company compared to peers, but why we like it is one simple reason. When we're looking at the universe within the diagnostic industry, we do not find any company that has the potential to grow at 25-30% top line growth for the next 3 or 4 years straight, right? If you look at the diagnostic industry in India, you'd be surprised that not all of it is very much organized, right? So you have roughly half of it still unorganized and 50% organized. When I say unorganized, it usually means mob and pop diagnostic centers that have always been there in your neighborhood, that you've been going to since childhood. They are usually run by a single doctor. When we talk about the organized aspect of the diagnostic center, what we mean by this is usually your diagnostic chains that have brand recall, right? That are pan-India national level diagnostic chains like Metropolis, Lalpat, Krishna, Vijaya, multiple Chandan, right? That have brand recall, have multiple labs across India, across a few states. And within the organized side of the business also, uh, which is 50%, उसमें से भी roughly 15-20% is your captive diagnostic companies that are within hospitals, then the rest 30% is your national level or state level branded diagnostic place. So what we're trying to say is that diagnostics is not yet an industry that is completely organized. There is still a huge delta that is waiting to go from unorganized to organized. And in that sense, the industry overall is a mega trend industry whereby these things will happen with time. Having said that, what has happened in the last 7-8 years, if you've observed in the industry, is that two things have happened, right? The first thing is that post COVID, the industry went from so there was a sudden bump in the tests done, right? And which is obvious because post COVID there was obviously a volume bump because of COVID tests, but there was also a volume bump for preventive diagnostics. People became more health conscious, and even the valuations of the listed companies had a huge surge. All of these companies which were trading at 20-25 times EV by EBITDA started trading at 50, 55, 60 or even 70 times EV by EBITDA. This was late 2021, 2022. And like something that happens at every single cycle, at the top of the cycle, acquisitions happen. PharmEasy acquired ThyroCare. There were acquisitions by Metropolis, Lalpat, Tata 1mg, and the listed and the organized side of the industry became consolidated. What has happened in the last 3-4 years, if you read through con calls, you will understand that everyone is guiding only a 10-15% growth rate, which is more or less the industry growth rate. So growth has definitely slowed down, and if not slowed down, it has plateaued in the industry. A company growing at 10-15% is not a good investment bet. It is just a very subpar investment bet, right? So we are always want to look for companies that can either outperform industry growth rate and even better grow at a rate which is double of the industry growth rate, because this is where the real alpha is made. And that is why we like Chandan, because it is the one company that has potential to do that. Of course, it has a much smaller base than its peers, but from a growth perspective, this is very much doable. Now, um, why we like this company, right? So let's just lay out our investment thesis for you all. I'll just share a small presentation that we've made, a small, simple, no frills presentation. So if you look at Chandan's business model today, firstly it has a holding company which is four business models, right? Four lines of businesses. So you have hospitals, diagnostics, pharmacy, and pharmaceutical. So the hospital arm is not listed; it's private. They have, I think, two hospitals which are out of the listed entity. The diagnostics and pharmacy arm of the business is listed, and the pharmaceutical arm, which is Sedanta Pharmaceuticals, is a very small company which they've recently started. The listed aspect of the business under Chandan Healthcare, which is diagnostic and pharmacy. So 50% of the business is in diagnostics, and 50% of the business roughly is pharmacy. Now, while pharmacy is a low EBITDA margin business, it's a 6% EBITDA margin business. And when I say pharmacy, what I mean is vanilla pharmacy stores where you can walk in and buy medicines. When they initially started the business, they thought of pharmacy as a cash cow, which will continuously generate cash, albeit a small amount of cash which can then be reinvested into their diagnostic business. So right now they have 40 pharmacy stores. The only good thing about this business, although it is a subpar business, is that these pharmacy stores end up becoming collection centers or doubling up as collection centers, which essentially means that you can go there and buy medicines, but they also act as collection centers whereby people can whereby they can collect blood samples which then go to the labs, and then you get the results digitally, right? Um the diagnostic part of their business, which is 50%, currently comprises of uh, 40 diagnostic labs and roughly 360 to 380 collection centers. Now, people who are, if you're not aware of how the diagnostic business has shaped up, there is one thing that you should know. The diagnostic business now completely operates on a something called hub and spoke model. Now, what is hub and spoke model? Let's say you have one lab in Andheri, which is a suburb in Bombay, right? Now that one lab will have 8 to 10 small 300, 400 square feet collection centers in and around 2 or 3 kilometer radius of that lab, right? These collection centers will have hardly 1 or 2 employees, right? Which will whose only job is to collect blood samples or any other samples and send them back to the lab, right? What this does is that this exponentially increases your distribution. A person can walk in into any of these collection centers, give their samples go back to the lab, they are processed in a batch, and then the results are given out digitally, right? So essentially, the entire diagnostic business it has become a logistics business. How fast the sample goes from the collection center to the lab, how fast the batches are made, how fast they are processed, and how fast the results are given out, that entire efficiency now dictates how well the company will do, right? So having more labs and having more collection centers is always a plus plus. One thing that we've noticed while we were reading the con calls for the last 4 5 years is that price per test is now a commodity. If Metropolis has a certain blood test at 200 rupees, Lalpath cannot have the same blood test at 250 or 300 rupees. It has to be at 200 rupees only, right? So it has more or less become like the telecom industry where average revenues per users, in this case, average revenue per test or per patient cannot be dramatically different. You cannot have one chain doing 200 rupees for a certain, test, and another chain cannot be doing 300 rupees. That kind of pricing power just does not exist. So the only way to win in this industry is distribution, 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 and volume growth. The more distribution you have, the more volume you can drive, and the more efficiently you can produce these batches and give out and these tests. And this is the only way you can improve your margins, right? Now, this is the value chain of the company that we've already discussed. Now, what is the big thing and why? What do we like in Chandan Healthcare is something we believe in is the rate of change, right? What when we're looking for investment bets, we're looking for a high rate of change, right? It doesn't matter if the company is going from very small to small or big to very big. You know, the highest rate of change will dictate the highest alpha, you know, in the markets. So this company is going to grow from 50%, and this is publicly stated by the company, 50% pharmacy and 50% diagnostics business to a 90% diagnostics and a 10% pharmacy business by FY28 or FY29. Now, how this is going to happen is not by decreasing their pharmacy business, but by exponentially increasing their diagnostic business, right? So the revenue mix that you're looking at, and this is something that we've discussed, 55% is diagnostics, 45% is pharmacy. Pharmacy is divided, this is the current revenue mix, is divided into 70% B2C, 30% B2B. When we say B2B, it is essentially supplying pharmaceutical drugs, ointments, etc. to hospitals and nursing homes, etc. Right? Within the diagnostics business, the current revenue mix is 78% patho and 22% radiology. Radiology has better margins because CT scans, X-rays, etc. are more expensive. The machines are more expensive, so margins are higher. Pathology is more commoditized, margins are lower, but it ends up becoming a volume game. In their current mix, B2C, which essentially, you know, walk-ins is 60%, B2G, which is, you know, you setting up of diagnostic labs in government hospitals and nursing homes is 23%, and B2B, which is when companies tie up with Chandan Healthcare so that employees can get tested, is roughly 18 to 20%. This entire shift of 55% diagnostics and 45% pharmacy is going to completely flip in the next 3-4 years to 90% diagnostics and 10% pharmacy, and that is what we like in the business. That is frankly the one of the two things that we like in the business. The second biggest thing that we like in the business, and the only thing that actually made us, you know, have a deep dive into this is the Gina Zico partnership. Now, if you have by chance heard about Gina Zico is currently the largest Ayurvedic hospital chain in this country. What I like about Gina Zico is not the Ayurveda aspect of it, but the fact that whatever Manish Acharya ji has done in the last few years, whatever the man has touched has turned into gold. He's the promoter of Gina Zico, in an incredible person in terms of execution, the way he has ramped up the hospitals. As of today, they have 40 hospitals and 100 clinics within Gina Zico. Now, all of these hospitals, they have tied up for an exclusive partnership with Chandan Healthcare. Now, why this is very important is these are the reasons for that. In the diagnostic business, it takes 12 to 15 months for a new lab to break even, right? If I have to have a new lab, I'll have to scout for a place, you know, the location has to be great. It has to be in a high population density area. Then I have to work hard for marketing. I have to work hard to create brand recall. I have to make sure that there are a steady number of inflow patients that come into my centers and my lab. How do I do that? I'll have to make an entirely new doctor referral network in case I enter a new state. So there's a lot of hard work that goes behind setting up diagnostic centers and making sure that they break even in 15, 18, 20 months. For Chandan Healthcare, now this entire exercise more or less becomes a cakewalk. During our scuttlebutt, what we found that it was not Chandan who approached Gina Zico, it was Gina Zico who approached Chandan Healthcare to set up diagnostic centers for their hospitals and their clinics, which is remarkable because there are so many people available in the market, so many branded chains available in the market who would have died for an opportunity like this. And then the fact that Jinasiko approach Chandan is a good testament, of their reputation is what we feel. Now, this is a 5-year exclusive partnership where Gina Sikho will set up, diagnostic centers within all 40 hospitals and in and around all the 100 clinics. It solves their problem of distribution. It solves their problem of brand recall. It solves their problem of breaking even. In our interaction, we learned that all of these centers, or the one or two centers that have started, for Jinasiko till now, have broken even in almost 2 or 3 months. Which is fantastic because the faster you break even on an EBITDA level, the pace of your growth becomes much more faster, right? Both on the top line and bottom line. Now, this partnership is in such a way that the revenue split is going to be 60% Chandan and 40% Jinasi. So if a 500 rupees test happened, 300 rupees will flow into Chandan Healthcare and 200 rupees will flow for Jinasi Co. Our understanding is that the volumes will more or less make up for the 200 rupees offset that will happen for Chandan Healthcare. And this is entirely going to be a volume game for them and not a margin expansion game, right? But during our understanding of the industry for the last so many years, we've not seen any player being handed out this kind of advantage at such a large scale that Chandan has. And if they have the ability to execute on this very well for the next 3-4 years, this company, in our sense, is going to be in another trajectory, because business is something where you have to, snatch business from other people. You have to snatch market share from other people. It's very rare for people to come out and hand over business on a platter to you. And this is an advantage that Chandan has. And I'm hoping that they execute well on this, right? And so the growth is going to be, if this is just a small snapshot of the growth, they are going to grow from 40 diagnostic centers to 100 plus diagnostic centers in the next 3 years. So the absolute CAGR of that growth is roughly 30% year on year for the next 3-4 years. And the most important lever of margin expansion is going to be the switch from company-owned, company-operated stores to franchisee collection centers. अब इसका meaning क्या है? It's very simple. If I am setting up, 10 collection centers for one lab, the hub and spoke model that we spoke about. If I am going to set up the 10 collection centers, as a company, I am going to pay the rent for them. I'm going to pay the refurbishment cost. I'm going to pay the manpower cost. But if I am going to have franchisees do this for me, then this does not have, all of these expenses do not happen in my P&L. They happen now in the P&L of the franchisee. He sets up the collection center. He takes care of the manpower cost, the refurbishment cost. Obviously he gets a cut out of the total MRP. But essentially I become an asset-light business model from an asset-heavy business model. This improves my return on capital employed, obviously, because I am not employing more capital for that incremental revenue, right? And this also then improves my margins. So, and in case if anyone has not understood what comprehensive centers means, so basically it's very simple. In every single diagnostic center, it is not possible to have pathology and radiology both. Why? Because radiology is very expensive. CT scan के machines 15-20 crore के आते हैं, X-ray machines are expensive. So what usually all of these listed diagnostic centers do, pathology is in every single lab, but for radiology they have specific labs which they call as comprehensive centers where you have pathology and radiology both. So 90% of the tests go from collection centers to diagnostics centers, and a few tests, including radiology, then go to the comprehensive centers, right? Now, one thing that I think we forgot to say is that Gina Seco raised a preferential round of I think 125 to 140 crores, if I'm not wrong, at a 350 rupees share price. And out of that preferential round, roughly 30 to 40% of the round was taken up by the promoter of Gina Seco themselves. So Manish Acharya ji, in his personal capacity through his investment arm, has invested in the preferential round that was done by Chandan Healthcare recently, which is a very big thing, because when you're not only giving business to Chandan, you're also investing in them to make sure that this business happens and is executed well, right? I have actually not seen something like this happen in the diagnostic industry for a long, long time, where business is being handed over by someone to you, and they are also investing in you to make sure that the business is executed well. So, with 125 crore rupees of money coming in, it takes roughly 5 or 6 crores to set up diagnostic centers. So the next 2025 diagnostic centers are going to happen out of this capex itself. So there is not going to be any more equity dilution or debt that is coming into this company. This preferential will itself make sure that the next 1 or 2 years of growth are sorted for this company, right? Now, why we feel this model can compound, while we do not have a 15-20 year view on this company, I am dead sure that with these three things happening, which is, one is the Gina Seco partnership with Chandan, second is Gina Seco infusing money themselves into Chandan and the preferential happening, next 2-3 years of growth are going to come how, and it's going to happen in a very good way. So we have a good 3-4 year view that when this company goes from 40 centers to 100 centers, and from 360 collection centers to 1,000 collection centers, the 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 growth is going to be exponential for at least the next 3-4 years, and this is something that will eventually reflect in the stock price, in our opinion. Now, while I personally do not believe in making large scale financial models, the revenues can be extrapolated and can be thought about in a very simple way. It's just arithmetic. Now, the revenue recognition in a diagnostic industry does not happen at the collection center level. If you basically, which what I'm trying to say is that the 10 collection centers that collect your blood samples and the cash do not recognize, the companies do not recognize revenue at the collection center level. They recognize revenue at the lab level, where all of these samples go. On an average, a good lab can do 5 to 7 crore revenue a year. Now, if there are going to be 100 labs by FY28, and obviously it takes time to break even, our assumption is by FY29 or so, more or less, the diagnostic business can do 600 to 700 crore top line, right? The pharmacy business will continue to do a 125, 150 crore top line, making the company grow from a 250 crore top line, which it was last year, to 800 to 850 crore top line in FY29. The pace of growth, I mean, if you just calculate, is 30-35% CAGR for the next 3-4 years. And that is something that is almost unheard of in this industry, right? This is what we look for in our companies. We want to back companies with a high pace of growth that is, sustainable for a few years, and that has a solid reason on why it will sustain, right? And this is something, these three things are what we found in Gina Seco. I will with this, video, I'm going to attach the notes that we've made. We are also going to have a management interaction in the next few weeks. We'll try and make sure that we attach that too. But having said that, would really like your views, and what do you all think about the company? Please do let us know. Thank you.